Okay, so today we're going to learn how to make Pong, and Pong is one of the easiest games to make. It requires about 3 assets, which is 2 graphics and 1 font, and about 5 components that we'll be programming. So I'm going to try to go through this as quickly as possible. One of the beautiful things about having a video on YouTube is that you can just pause and go back. So let's get started. So I'm going to open up GameMaker Studio. So we can do this from the very beginning. So let's go to Make. We're going to make a new game. So I'm going to put this in a project. This is Pong Tutorial. The project name, Pong Tutorial. Let's create it. Sorry, I have a bit of a wheeze in my lung today. So this is the GameMaker Studio interface. It's very frightening to first-time users, but we're going to make this as simple as possible. Now, in order to make Pong, what you've got is you've got a bat on one side controlled by the player, a bat on the other side controlled by the AI, and a ball that kind of bounces around. Like so. This is, of course, the player. This, of course, is the AI. And you want to get the ball to not go that way, but you do want for the ball to go this way. The AI blocks the ball, tries to hit it back at you. You do the same in return. There's score. Usually it's if you get to 10 points, you win. So the first thing that we need to do is we need to create bats. Now, first thing that we're going to do is we're going to create a sprite. Now, both bats will share the same sprite, so that's easy enough. We're going to name the sprite SPR bat. Now, the reason why I give it a prefix like this, SPR underscore, is because the name of the sprite is important in the code. If you refer to that name, the code will know that you're talking about this sprite. Now, it won't come into play a whole lot during this exercise, but it's a good habit to form. So we're going to create the bat. Now, I clicked up here. Here, let's go back. We have the sprite named SPR bat, and I'm going to click on Edit Sprite. This brings up the sprite editing window thing. I'm going to create a new sprite by clicking on this notepad looking thing up there. And we're going to give this, excuse me, these dimensions are in pixels, by the way. And if you don't know what pixels are, I'll be sure to link another video describing how graphics work. We're going to make things rather small in resolution today. So we're just going to go ahead and make the bat 16 by 48. That looks terrible. Let's create a new one. Let's do 16 by 64. I like that one a little bit better. And what I'm going to do is when I click on this here, image 0, I'm going to click on this little pencil that says edit the image. I'm going to zoom in by clicking on the magnifying glass, grab the paint bucket, select white as my color, and fill it in. So now we have a white block here, and we're done with that. We're done with the bat. The next thing that I'm going to do, however, is I'm going to set the origin just by clicking on center. Now, the origin, all that does is it says that the X and Y coordinate will always be based around this center, this origin. Whenever you rotate a sprite in the game, it will rotate around that as an axis. whenever you try to set the very position of it, that little center is what the absolute position, the absolute coordinate will be. Now, if that sounds a little complicated right now, don't worry too much about that yet. This is going to be pretty simple so far. Now we have the bat. Next thing that we need is the ball. Now, this is Pong, so I'm going to make the ball a square. And you can hate me for that. It's okay. Now, just like we did with the bat, we're jumping into the sprite editor. And this time we're going to create a sprite that's 16 by 16. I kind of want this one to be absolutely proportionate to itself. I want for it to be a perfect square. So 16 by 16. You can see how the pixels work here. Let's do a demonstration here. Let's zoom all the way in. Let's toggle this grid. You can see here 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. It's 16 pixels across. And if I were to do the same up and down, it would be the exact same way. Take my word for it. So let's center that one as well. Don't forget to center it. This will be more important than you realize, especially later on when you have pathfinding AI, or if you have a turret that shoots at something, you want to make sure that's shooting at the center of them rather than the upper left-hand corner at them, which just looks silly and ridiculous. And people can spot that mistake from a mile away. You don't want to make that mistake. All right, congratulations. We have the bat, we have the ball. That is 2 of the 3 assets that we're going to need before moving forward. Now, the font won't really come into play until later, but let's just go ahead and get it out of the way. Let's right-click on this folder here that says fonts and create a font. And for font, I usually give it a prefix of FNT. Now, the prefixes can be whatever you want, but I always make them 3 characters long, and they're always something that I can remember. So FNT I can always remember as font. SPR I can always remember as sprite. I usually break the rule a little bit. I do BG for backgrounds, so that's not 3 characters, but sue me. And just to make things stylistically similar, since everything's kind of blocky right now, I'm going to turn the anti-aliasing off for this. Anti-aliasing, all that does is it blurs the font so that it looks smoother. It's a very subtle blur. It kind of interpolates the pixels around it so that it all kind of comes together. You can see it in action in Paint. If I were to type in like hello, so you can see it kind of looks like it's just normal pixels, but when you zoom in, you've got like yellow over here, you've got blue and orange, and it's just, oh, it's a mess. So I'm turning anti-aliasing off. I'm not going to use Arial because I don't really like Arial. Let's scroll down. What's a fun one? How about Courier? I'm gonna end up wasting way too much time on this. Okay, Deja Vu Sans Mono. That works just great for me. I'm gonna turn off high quality as well because I don't know what that does. I'm gonna set that size to 10. Just because I want to. I'm just going to set this as font because there's only going to be one font in the entire game. So now we have a font. I'm going to save the game. You want to save the game very, very often because you never know when GameMaker will just... You don't want that to happen when you've done a whole bunch of work. You really don't. So there we go. We have 3 assets. That's all the assets that we need. Now there are 5 components that we're going to program. And the first one, the easiest one, is going to be the room. So let's right click on the room folder and create a room. Now we don't really program the room per se. We just edit some properties in its menu. So as you can see, we have this great big grid here. That is the room. That is the screen that you will see when you start up the game, and it will act as levels when you make multi-leveled games, or boards if you call them boards instead. I know that some people do that. So let's go on the settings tab up here in the upper left hand corner. Let's go to settings, and I'm just gonna rename the room because I usually do that. I'm just gonna name this room_game. You don't have to do that. That's just something that I prefer to do. And I'm gonna change the width of this to 480 by, let's try 320. I think that's pretty good. I think that's a good dimension for this. Now, keeping in mind that the bat is only about, gosh, what was it, 64 pixels tall, that means that would take, what, 5? Not many of these to fill this up, but I don't want for you to have a giant playing field when you're in Pong. You shouldn't have to shoot way over to the other end, unless that's the way you want to make the game, in which case you're absolutely free to do so. But that's not how I'm going to do it today. So these are the resolution for the room, which again in pixels. Just about everything's in pixels. Anything dimensional is in pixels. Anything temporal, as in doing with time, is done in frames or steps, which are kind of the same thing as frames in GameMaker. So we have a width of 480 pixels and a height of 320 pixels. And if you're to zoom in, I don't even know if the grid works this way. Oh, it does. We have a pixel grid if we go all the way in, but that's going to be absolutely unnecessary. By the way, I changed the snap X and the snap Y to 1 and 1. So that this way when we're laying down our bats later on, they're not constrained to a grid, because we really don't need them to be. Now, let's go to backgrounds and change the color by clicking on this gray brick here and just change that to black, because white on black, maximum contrast, it's beautiful. Anyway, so we're done programming the room for now. Let's save. So the first component that we're going to program in its entirety is the bat. But first, haha, you thought I was going to go for the bat first. First, I need something called the game control. And game control is the component that's going to determine how everything works. It's going to determine the global operations of the game. Now, I don't know if this is the way that everybody does it, but I almost always throw in a game control object just because I find it really, really easy to control. And I do this with every game that I make. Now, the game control object in terms of Pong is going to determine score, pauses between rounds, when a player wins, and your ability to exit the game. Now, that last thing is what I'm really concerned about right now. So I'm going to go into here. So we have our object. We've named it obj_game_control. We're not giving it a sprite. It does not need one. I'm going to click down here for add event. And events are conditions under which scripts are executed. So scripts are what happen in the game, and an event is a condition under which that happens. If you want for something to always be checking if it's going to happen, you would put that in step, which is to say every frame of the game it will check. But for right now, all that we're going to do is for key press, we're going to go down to escape. We're going to go to these side tabs here, click on main 2, find this one that looks like a power button, that's end game, and we're just going to drag that in there. And that's just about all of the drag and drop programming I'm going to be doing here. Most of the rest I'm going to be doing in script, and if you're frightened by script, there are other tutorials that will show you how to do this stuff in drag and drop, but I think that's really, really important to start actually scripting, start actually using syntax as soon as possible. So we're just going to hit OK. We have game control, and then we're going to jump into room game again. Click on the objects tab. Click on this blank spot here. Click on object game control in the drop down menu that comes out. And it's going to look like this blue circle with a red question mark, and we're just going to throw it in the upper left hand corner. It doesn't actually matter where it is, as long as it's in the room somewhere. So now that that's there, if we were to click save and now click on the green thing, the little green arrow there, that will actually play the game, and we will actually get to play the game so far. So you'll see it all compiling down here in the compile window. And now we have the game. This is the game. This is what it looks like right now. It's a black room, and if I were to hit escape, it closes. Just as planned. Now, that's not, of course, how the full game is going to end up looking. So let's go and add our next object. Now, like I said, the first object that we're going to be programming in its entirety is the player's bat. So let's do obj player. And let's give it the sprite of the bat. Let's click OK, and let's throw it in the same way that we threw in the game control. Let's put it right there. I think that looks good. Now let's click the green check mark, save, and now it's in there. But there's one fatal flaw, and that's that we have given no scripts to it. We've only assigned it a sprite and given it a starting position, and it just sits there. And we don't want for it to just sit there. That's bad. So let's click the X. Let's double click on object player, and let's get to programming. Now the first thing that I'm going to program, let's go to create, and let's drag, okay, here, let me slow down a moment here. So I went to add event, I added create, and within the event of create, I went to this side tab here called control. I grabbed under the heading of code this little notepad thing, not the one with the little play symbol next to it, just the little notepad. And that executes a piece of code. Now, here is where I'm going to start programming for the first time. Now, I'm going to start out pretty fast. And what I plan to do is I'm going to try to explain this while I do it. And it may be fast, so you may have to set the video back a couple times to fully get what I'm saying here. But if I'm talking too fast, feel free to leave a comment on the video, or just wait a little while. I will be sure to make individual videos just teaching how to script in general and not for a particular project. And then I will put them in annotations on this video so that you can kind of figure out what you need to know in a more specialized video. Gosh, I'm just butchering the English language today. All right. So let's start. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to label this script. And the way that you do that is you do 3 slashes. And then anything that I type after that, so like for example, if I were to type in farty poopy, because I'm a grown-ass adult, let's click on the green check mark. Now you can see that that script is called farty poopy. Now you might think that this is completely useless, but when we're naming a script, once you have a lot of scripts, it's going to be really hard to find your position again. You need to make sure that you have everything bookmarked, labeled exactly in a way that you'll be able to find it again. So what I'm going to name this is initializing variables. And what I'm going to do in the script is I'm going to initialize a couple variables. Now I will definitely need to make a video just talking about variables, how variables work. But just to kind of really quickly talk about it here, a variable is, it's like a cup, and you fill that cup up with data, whatever data you want it to be, and then you can call on that cup later, and that cup will be represented, or it will represent whatever data you put in that cup. So for example, if I were to say starting x equal to x, then that means that x, as in the starting x position, actually I want for this to be y, sorry, this is going to be confusing now. Starting y equal to y, then that means that the y position in pixels is saved under starting y. So if I were to ever set anything, like for example, example equal to starting y, since the last thing that starting y was set to is y, example will be set to y because that's the data that's in starting y. Now, I can describe this in a much better way later, and I will absolutely try to, but this is the way that I'm going to have to start here. So starting y equal to y. I might not need to come back to this variable, but I like to have it there just in case. So that's starting y. We have that initialized variable. Now the next thing that we have to decide is, do we want for the paddle to be controlled by mouse or by keyboard? For this, I'm going to do by mouse. Usually if I wanted to do by keyboard, I would probably demonstrate that more in a game like Space Invaders or something like that. For now, let's stick with mouse for now. So I'm going to create step. Now remember that step means every step of the game. So every frame. Now if there's 30 frames per second, which there are in GameMaker, you can modify it to be 60 frames per second, but that's a different thing for a different day. If there's 30 frames per second, which there are by default, then that means that any action that we put in here will happen 30 times a second. So let's throw a code in here, and what we're going to name this one, where is it? What's happened? Dear God. There we go. I had a bit of a glitch there. Sorry. So we're going to name this one mouse controls, and I will know that anything that's in there is going to be mouse controls. Sorry, I have a Skype chat going on down there that I'm not even a part of. So mouse controls. So what we're going to do is we're going to program the bat to do a couple important things. First, we're going to make it so that it will move to where the mouse is. But second, we're going to make sure that it never goes off of the screen. So what we're going to do is we're going to figure out that mouse underscore y tells us where the vertical position of the mouse is on the screen. That's important to remember. That is a part of built-in GameMaker syntax. Anytime you put mouse underscore y, you find the vertical position of the mouse on the screen in pixels. So what we're going to do is we are going to create an if statement, a conditional. We're going to say if mouse underscore y is smaller than y. Then we're going to add a couple brackets, and anything within these brackets only happen if mouse y is less than y. Now y is the position of the bat on the origin. So if the cursor has a y position which is less, this kind of does an opposite up and down than what you're probably used to with normal graphing. But up is negative, down is positive here. If mouse y is less than y means if the cursor is above the middle of the bat. So what are we going to do? Well, we're going to have y equal to mouse y, right? I mean, it seems like the easiest way to do it, right? If mouse y is greater than y, then we're just going to do y equal to mouse y, right? I mean, that's pretty simple. Let's see what happens there. And again, this is Pong, and Pong is something that you can do like a million different ways, including many ways more simple than the way that I'm doing this. Now, oh no, it goes out of the screen. I don't want it to go out of the screen. I've failed. But, I mean, so far so good, right? We've got it going up and down. So far so good. But we don't want it going out of the screen. So the next thing that I'm going to do... Now, in this case, really, these conditionals, not necessary. I hate to break it to you. I I can do this just as easily just by doing this. Y equal to mouse Y, always. But we want for the Y to stop short of going out of the bat going out of the room. So what we're going to have to do there is we're going to have to figure out how many pixels taller than the center origin is the edge of the bat, and obviously that's 32. You can see by the position of the origin, it's 32 pixels down. So what we're going to do is if Y is less than 32, and what that will do is that will check if the Y is less than 32 pixels from the very top of the room. And if it is, Y equal to 32. That will set the Y position equal to 32 pixels from the top. Now let's see what happens when we do that. Let's save it first, of course, and now let's test it. Boop, 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 boop. Perfect. It won't follow me out. Boop, 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 boop. But it still goes all the way down, so what do we have to do here? Well, while the top of the room is 0, the bottom of the room is not defined as 0. We have to figure out what the bottom of the room is. Well, thankfully there is a term, there is syntax in GameMaker that just immediately finds that out, and that is room underscore height, and we're going to have to do room underscore height minus 32. So that's 32 pixels from the bottom of the room, because room height will be equal to the height of the room in pixels. And of course we want this to be if Y is larger than that. Now let's save. Let's go to this. And what do you know? It's perfect. Guess what? We've just programmed the player. Now the next thing that I'm going to do really quickly, just because I think this is going to be what we should have, is I'm going to start creating the ball. So object ball. Okay, ball. And we're gonna throw the ball in. Let's not throw the ball in. What we're gonna do is on game control, we are going to create the way that the game starts. So on the event of create, we're going to create a script here, and this script is going to be called round start. Actually, game start. And on game start, we're going to set alarm 0 equal to 15 frames, and alarm 1 equal to 20 frames. Now, on event, we can choose alarm 0. And on alarm 0, what we're going to do is we are going to create the ball. And with that, we're going to do instance create. Now, an instance is what you call an object that actually appears in the game, because an object is just a template. It's the base code, but an instance is, well, it's exactly what it's called. It's an instance of the object's code executing in the game. You only have one object, but you have multiple instances of that object, or you can. Anyway, instance create, we're going to do room width divided by 2, obviously meaning the very middle of the room. Room height divided by 2, very middle of the room. OBJ ball. And obviously that's going to create the ball. And that's alarm 1, but we set a second alarm. And what the second alarm is going to do is launch the ball. So what we can do is, if we were to start trying to set speeds in here, Set speed equal to 8 and direction equal to 135 plus random 90, then what that's going to do is that's going to set the speed for object game control. And we don't want to set the speed for object game control. We want to set the speed for object ball. So the way that we do that is similar to an if statement. We put this in brackets, but instead of saying if this or that, we do with obj ball. And then all of that will happen to the ball. But what about the rules of Pong? It should only launch at the last person who lost, right? That's the person who serves, so to speak. So what we're going to do is under game control create and our script called game start, we're going to have ball direction equal to 0. And we're going to say if ball direction equal to 0, then we'll do what we just said. And what this will do is it will set the speed to move 8 pixels per second, or per frame rather, excuse me. And it will set the direction of the ball that it will move in to 135. Let me demonstrate this for you here. So a 0 direction is pointing completely to the right, and so is 360. So this is 0/360. Now pointing directly up is 90. Pointing all the way to the left is 180, and so on. And pointing diagonally obviously would be 90 divided by 2, which is 45. So it's 90 plus 45. Why? That would be 135. So if you wanted to create something, or if you wanted to launch something in a fan, if you wanted for it to be random but within this realm of possibility, all that you would have to do is 135 plus whatever that fan is, which is 90 degrees. Yeah, there's some geometry here, and I apologize, but it's the most simple stuff, I swear, and this is stuff that I taught myself in 4th grade while failing all my math classes, so trust me, it's easier than you think. So when you put something in random like that, it chooses a number out of random between 0 and whatever you put in there. So when I put 135 plus random 90, that means anything between 135 and 225, which is the exact fan that I want to have if it's going to launch at the player. Now on else, if ball direction is not equal to 0, we're going to have a direction of 45 minus random 90, which would be a fan over here. Make sense? I hope so. If not, be sure to leave a comment and I'll try to explain further. It makes so much more sense than it may seem at first. I promise. So now a ball gets created. Let's see what happens. Oh dear God. Now that ball would have just gone right through the bat. If it were moving upwards, it would have just kind of gone straight through the ceiling. We need to do something about that. So let's go to object ball, Let's go to step. And let's give it ball behavior. Now the first thing that I want to do, if you're putting a label or what's actually called a comment in your script to better organize your script, you just do that with 2 slashes. Here I'm going to do bounce off of walls. And so this is going to be if y minus 8, because remember, we have to make sure that it's 8 above the origin, so to the edge of the sprite. If y minus 8 is less than 0, we need to set y equal to 8 and make sure that v speed, which is vertical speed, is equal to the absolute value of v speed. Now, if you don't know what absolute value is, it's just a thing in math that makes it so that if something's a negative, it's a positive, and if something's a positive, it's still a positive. So a positive vertical speed will always be moving downwards. That's what we want to happen here. If y plus 8 is greater than room height, then we need to set y equal to room height minus 8 and set v speed equal to -1 times absolute v speed. And times, by the way, is done with an asterisk here. That's just kind of the way that this kind of thing works. Moving forward, that's what happens if you, that's what you want to do if you want it to bounce off the walls. But the problem is that it's still going to go straight through the player's bat. So we're not even going to probably even see it bounce off of the top and bottom walls. So we're going to want to do some extra stuff here. So let's do, no, I can't do that in here. Let's do collision with object player really quickly. And for this, we're going to execute a piece of code called bounce off of bat. And for that, I'm going to cheat a little bit. There's a lot of different ways to do this, but what I want to do is I want to set the direction of the ball equal to point direction. Now for point direction, you put in 2 sets of coordinates, and it points from the first coordinates towards the other coordinates. And what I'm going to do here is I'm going to do x, y, other dot x, other dot y. Other in this case being the player, the object that, or the instance rather, that's causing this collision, that's causing this event. And what we're going to do is we're just going to add 180, so that goes in the opposite direction. But we also want to make sure that h speed, horizontal speed of the ball, is always going to be absolute value of h speed, meaning that it's always moving to the right. Just like how -1 is up and +1 is down, -1 is left and +1 is right. So we want it to be absolute h speed. And we definitely want to make sure that the h speed does not hit 0 at this point. That would be bad. That would mean that the ball is stuck and the game is broken. So what we're going to do there is we're going to make sure that the h speed is maximum one or absolute h speed. So what that means is that if absolute h speed goes under 1 pixel, then 1 pixel forward, then it will just automatically set to 1, because 1 would be the maximum value here. That way it prevents it from getting to 0, which again would mean that it's just at a standstill and the game is broken. You don't want for the ball to get at a standstill there. So let's see how that works. Amazing. It's working great so far. We're still missing a couple things. So the ball is mostly programmed. The player is completely programmed. We now have one more component to add, and then we can make all the components work together the way that they're supposed to. So the final component is obj enemy. He will also have a sprite of the bat, and we're going to want to put him about as adjacent to the player as possible. So doesn't really have to be exact or anything, but let's just throw him over there. Now there's a lot of different ways to do AI for the enemy, but the way that I do it is that the enemy has a certain speed at which he can move, but he will only move if the ball is coming towards him. Whenever the ball is moving away from him, he won't move at all. So, the way that we're going to program this is we're going to go to step, and we can actually give him the same code, just copy and paste it for his boundaries. So we're going to type in enemy AI, and down here, level boundaries. And those are his boundaries still. It's the exact same as the player. This way he doesn't go up through the level. Now the next thing that we want to do is we want to say if instance number? Yeah, instance number of object ball is not equal to 0. So what we're checking here is we want to make sure that there is a ball in the room. Otherwise, the code that we're about to put in would crash the game. So as long as there is a ball in the room, we're going to say if object ball dot h speed is greater than 0. So as long as it's moving towards, or moving to the right, moving towards the enemy, that's important, because that's how this AI is going to work. This is how the player is going to be able to trip up the AI. So now what we're going to say is if object ball dot v speed is greater than 0, actually no. What we're going to do is we're going to say if object ball dot y is greater than y plus 16. Yeah, that'll give him a nice buffer there. If object ball dot y is greater than y plus 16, then y will plus equal, which means that we'll just add to that value 4. Let's make the enemy move really slowly. And let's just do the exact opposite of that. Hopefully you were able to see what I did there. So now we have if object ball.y is greater than y plus 16, then y plus equal to 3. If object ball.y minus or is less than y minus 16, then y minus equal to 3. Now we're going to save that, but we also need to, before anything else, duplicate the ball's collision with the player as a collision with the enemy. And all that we're going to do here is change the h speed aspect of that equal to max. Instead of max, it's going to be a minimum, so min -1 or absolute, or -1 times absolute h speed. Because now we need for it to be traveling to the left, which is in negatives. Remember this. So let's save it, and it should be working. Let's take a look. Boop. There he goes. As you can see, he has pretty good AI, but you're certainly able to trick him. And now he's chasing the ball. Good job, buddy. All right. We have the enemy, we have the player, we have the ball. Last thing to do is to have score. So let's open up Object Game Control, and on Game Start, which is where we're initializing our variables for the game, we're going to have points equal to 0 and losses equal to 0. Now points will correspond to points won by the player, and losses will correspond to points won by the enemy. Now we're going to add a new event, and this one's going to be called draw. And all that draw does is it draws whatever it is you tell it to. And we're going to throw a code in here, and this is going to be called draw score. And we are going to draw, we're going to draw set font to FNT font, because that's the font we want to use. Draw set color to C_white, because we want for the font to be white. Draw set H align, which is the horizontal alignment of the text, which I'm going to set to FA center. Draw set V align, which is the vertical alignment, which I'm going to set to FA middle. And now I'm just going to draw text at object player.x plus 16. So that's the x position in the room. That's going to draw this text. And then the y is just going to be 64. And instead of plus 16, let's do 32. Just because I want to. And the string, which usually means the text, is going to be string, and then in parentheses points. So string means, a string is a variable, but it's in text. And if you do string and then put something in parentheses, it will turn it into text. So if it's a number, it will treat it as text. That's all that means. And let's do the same thing for the losses. Object.enemy minus 32 and string losses. So now it will draw the wins and losses, but that's not all that I want to do. I need to make it so that when the ball goes out of the room, we get our points. So let's go back to object ball, and let's add a new comment here. This will be point for player. Now this is if x is less than -30. Let's do -32. This means that if it's 32 pixels outside of the room to the left, oh, this should be a point for enemy, shouldn't it? This is point for enemy. Then we're going to do object game control dot losses plus equal to 1. Object control dot alarm 0 equal to 30, and object game control dot alarm 1 equal to 45, and instance destroy. So let's talk about what's happening here. So the first thing that's doing is it's counting up one loss. The losses are a variable that game control handles, so we have to do game control dot losses. That way it's telling me, hey, this is a variable that's owned by whatever precedes the dot. Same with the alarms. This is game control's alarm. And then instance destroy just destroys the ball, which will be recreated, if you remember, by the alarms in game control. The first alarm creates the ball, the second alarm launches the ball. So That's a point for the enemy. Let's say for a point for the player now. So let's just copy all this code. Now it's a point for the player. So this is if x is greater than room width plus 32. And now it's going to be gameControl.points plus equal to 1. Let's try that out and see how it all works. By this point, we should have a game that mostly works. So as you can see, we have a couple of zeros here. Now I have 1 point there. Oh, you know what I forgot to do is I forgot to make it switch. I forgot to make it switch for the player, for the winning player. So let's just show that we're able to fight against this AI really quickly. He's a little bit too easy. I might want to speed him up at some point. So let's go back to ball. If you remember, we have this thing called ball direction. So back in step for the ball, we're going to want to say if it's a point for the enemy, gameControl.ball direction will be equal to 0. If it's a point for the player, ball direction should be equal to 1. Now the way that we programmed this before this should mean that, oh my goodness, as you can see there, I kind of crunched the ball there, which was fortuitous for myself. Oh, the enemy's doing pretty well this time, but not well enough. So now I got a point, and now it's going to launch towards the enemy, which might get him in a bit of a losing loop there, but now, thankfully now I can get it. But if I lose on purpose, the next one should launch at me, which it does. Perfect. So now, really the only thing that we have left to do is go into game control. This will be the win or the lose. On alarm 0, on create the ball, what we're going to say is if points is greater than 9 or losses is greater than 9, then we'll do one thing, and on else, we'll do this other thing. Now, if points is greater than 9, oops, then we will set alarm 2 equal to 10. And if if losses is greater than 9, oh my goodness, then alarm 3 will be equal to 10. Now let's go to create here, and let's create something here called win message. And this one's going to be a string, so we're just going to set it to two quotation marks with nothing in between them. That means that's going to be an empty string. Now on alarm 2, we're going to set win message equal to player 1 wins. And on alarm 3, we're going to set that message to player 2 wins. And on the create the ball, we're going to set, we're going to set win message equal to that, because the next thing for us to do is on each of these win messages, we're going to set points equal to 0, losses equal to 0, and alarm 0 equal to 50. We're going to do that on both alarm 2 and 3. And now the final thing to do is to go into draw, and we're going to draw one last thing of text. And the X is going to be room width divided by 2, room height divided by 2, the string win message. Let's just make sure that win message is indeed what's called. Yes. So this means that after 9 points, somebody wins. So let's try to get to those 9 points. This may be easier than we anticipated. Four. Come on, come on, come on. 5, 6, 7. Ah, so close. 8. Only 2 points away. 9. Now for the final point. 10. Player 1 wins. It resets the score and starts a new game. But it doesn't launch the ball. Oh no, I forgot the most important part of all. So let's just go to alarm 2, set alarm 1 equal to 65. And let's just copy that over to the bottom of alarm 3. And now everything should work. And that's how you create Pong. And I mean, that's something that you can expand upon in a lot of ways, and I'd love to make a series where that's all that I do is expand upon it. But that's how you make one of your first games, and it only took us, I mean, an hour or so. There's a lot of more interesting things that you could do with the enemy AI. There's more interesting things you could do with the ball. You could make power-ups if you wanted to, but this is, excuse me. This is an absolutely passable game that works. And I mean, really, isn't that all that you really want from your first game? Is something that works. So once you have this down, you can play with it. You can add graphics to it. You can add sounds to it. You can add after images to the ball. There's all sorts of fun things you can do once you've gotten this far, and I encourage you to play around with it. And if you do make something using this as your base, I encourage you to upload a video, and I'd love to share it and make a video talking about your creation and showing how absolutely cool it is and how much I enjoy it. Let's get one more win before we end this video. I have felt the table tennis bloodlust, and I am ready to feel it again. Oh, that was a neat little trick he did there. But little does he know what I've got up on my sleeve. Ooh, he's wising up. Come on, come on, come on. That was terrible. There we go. That one will get him. Boom. 10. Player 1 wins. And we just start another game. Beautiful. So, that's how you create Pong. Be sure to comment any questions. I'd love to hear from you guys. Until next time.